Hello again, everybody. It's a pleasure to be talking with you again. I'm making a video today to celebrate what is my favorite book of all time, and that's Moby Dick, baby. I got 2 copies right here. I'm really excited to talk about this book. I figured that I should open my Booktube channel proper with a bang. And you don't you don't bang more than this book, if you know what I'm saying. But first, before I get into this book, I really did genuinely want to say thank you to everyone who has watched my first 2 videos. I put them up right, I think the day after I recorded them, and like magic, all of the Booktube channels that I love were in my comment section. People who I've been watching for 2 years now are like talking to me in my comment section. That's crazy. So that made me really, really happy. Some of the comments made me laugh out loud. And it was unanimously kind. Not that it matters that it was unanimous. I mean, it's the internet, so eventually there's going to be people who are, negative, and that's life. But really, thank you. That truly touched me. I feel like this place, this corner of Booktube, as we say, is real, and that the people on it are real and friendly and real and kind. And yeah, thank you. That was awesome. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about Moby Dick. I mentioned this, and I mentioned that it was my favorite book in those first 2 videos, so I figured I would just start talking about it, because the main thing I'm going to do on my channel, which I probably won't really upload tons of videos on, but the main thing I want to do in this channel is to talk about the books that I love. So I figured to start at the top, which is Moby Dick. The first thing that I'll say about it is a slight recap of what I said in the earlier 2 videos, which is how I came to this book and kind of what I knew about it and why I chose to read it in the first place. Because if you're a young person like myself and are kind of approaching reading for the first time as like a post-college genuine hobby that you want to pursue, you can feel overwhelmed at not only the canon, but just at like a bookstore. You just look around and there's lots of things that you want to read. You see lots of things that you should read, or you feel like maybe you should have read, and you say to yourself, where do I begin? I began with this book, and I'll tell you how. I was at a bookstore in LA, as I said earlier, and saw this copy of Moby Dick and read the first paragraph of the first chapter. And to hopefully simulate a little bit of that experience, I figured that I would read this first paragraph to you. I have a couple of sections, as you can see, in my shiny, shiny book that is reflecting. I have a couple of sections that I would love to read to y'all. And I'll just begin with the opening. The first line will be known to every single person who's a native English speaker, but the first paragraph probably is not, so I'll do my best. Chapter 1. Loomings. Call me Ishmael. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. It is a way I have of driving off the spleen and regulating the circulation. Whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet, and especially whenever my hypos get such an upper hand of me that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off, then I count it high time to get to sea as soon as I can. This is my substitute for pistol and ball. With a philosophical flourish, Cato throws himself upon his sword. I quietly take to the ship. There's nothing surprising in this. If they but knew it, almost all men in their degree, sometime or other, cherish very nearly the same feelings towards the ocean with me. And when I first read that, first of all, I laughed out loud at the like bringing up the ends of every funeral I meet. Just, that's hilarious. I mean, you're depressed and you just see a funeral procession. You're like, well, I better just join in. I was laughing in the bookstore. And then I read that last sentence and I thought, I have kind of felt that way about the ocean, but probably not in the way that Melville feels about the ocean, or that he thinks people in 1851 think about the ocean. But when I finished this book, I started really feeling that way about the ocean. By the way, I didn't really give any background on this book. Perhaps I should do that now before I go into my own kind of passionate launching into why I love this. But yes, this is Moby Dick. It is a book that was published in the year 1851 and was written by the author Herman Melville. And Herman Melville had experience as a sailor on merchant vessels, as Ishmael in this book does, who's the narrator, as you know from the first line, and also on whaling vessels. He wrote about those experiences in pretty fictionalized accounts in his first books, Typee and Omu, or the first two. I read Typee and it was wonderful. Omu I would love to get to soon. Anyways, he really did have the experience needed to write about these things, not only realistically, but passionately. He loves this stuff. I mean, this guy loves whaling and loves talking about it, and that comes up a lot in this book. But it's important to know that historical context, not only because of just the fact that it may have aged, but especially just because of the language. The language of Moby Dick can be challenging, but it's not so challenging as to need a dictionary on hand or to even have notes. You know, I have this Norton Critical Edition, which I haven't read, but has some letters. I did some research for this video just to be able to talk about it more in depth, and there's a section of one of his letters that I read that I would love to read to y'all. But you don't really need notes to read Moby Dick. Did I say that right? Notes to read, or did I say rotes to need? Anywho, you don't need notes to read this book. And I can support that claim by the fact that I didn't read it without notes. This edition has no notes in it whatsoever beyond the ones that Melville himself provides. And that's kind of bizarre because this is a book about a dead industry with a lot of nautical terms that someone like me, or maybe you, probably if you're not a whaler, not that there really are any left besides maybe Japan, no one really knows these terms anymore, and yet you can still read it. Why is that? Why does it work? I have a theory. I'll maybe go into this theory more in depth later, but maybe I'll start now. And the theory as to why Moby Dick works and why it can make sense goes down to the fact that Melville, as he was writing this book, was writing totally instinctively. He was writing in a flow state, as we would say today. This is something that I kind of felt as I was reading it. You get the sense reading Moby Dick that the person who was writing this was hypnotized. But I also have this letter that I just mentioned that kind of signals this. This is a letter to Everett A. Dueknik, whoever that is, and he was writing about his daily life as he was writing Moby Dick. From what I know, he had purchased land in Massachusetts, in upstate, and he had named it Arrowhead, I believe, after Native American Indian arrowheads that he found on the property. But he was writing about his time spent up there writing Moby Dick over the course of 18 months. And when I found this, I was just so excited. This is an amazing, insightful passage that he wrote. Do you want to know how I pass my time? I rise at 8, thereabouts, and go to my barn, say good morning to the horse and give him his breakfast. It goes to my heart to give him a cold one, but it can't be helped. Then pay a visit to my cow, cut up a pumpkin or two for her, and stand by to see her eat it. For it's a pleasant sight to see a cow move her jaws. She says she does it so mildly and with such a sanctity. My own breakfast over, I go to my workroom and light my fire. Then spread my MSS on the table, take one business squint at it, and fall to with a will. At 2:12 p.m., remember we started at 8, at 2:12 p.m., I hear a preconcerted knock at my door, which, by request, continues till I rise and go to the door, which serves to wean me effectively from my writing, however interested I may be. That's fascinating. My friends, the horse and cow, now demand their dinner, and I go and give it to them. My own dinner over, I rig my sleigh and with my mother or sister start off for the village. I mean, come on, he's riding a sleigh with his mom and his sisters to the village. That's just such a great image. And if it be a literary world day, great is the satisfaction thereof. My evenings I spend in a sort of mesmeric state in my room, not being able to read, only now and then skimming over some large printed book. Can you send me about 50 fast-writing youths with an easy style and not averse to polishing their labors? If you can, I wish you would, because since I have been here, I have planned about that number of future works and can't find enough time to think about them separately. But I don't know but a book in a man's brain is better off than a book bound in calf, and at any rate, it is safer from criticism. For those of you who know, that's a very sad sentence to read now, for him to say it's safer from criticism to keep a book in one's brain than to write it, because famously Moby Dick was not critically well received and not commercially well received. and may or may not have been responsible for a slight nervous collapse that Melville suffered from. Kind of very, very sad stuff. Not maybe as sad as the narrative of biographers would lead us to believe, but it is sad that Moby Dick wasn't well received, and it did really wound him. Anyways, to continue, at any rate, it is safer from criticism. And taking a book off the brain is akin to the ticklish and dangerous business of taking an old painting off a panel. You have to scrape off the whole brain in order to get at it with due safety. And even then, the painting may not be worth the trouble. That's amazing. That is such an insightful paragraph. There's a couple of things that I love about this and why I'm trying to bring this up at the, hopefully at the beginning or middle of this video. And one of them is when he describes the mesmeric state which it leaves him in. For those of you who are creative, you'll probably know that after a long period of time spent focused on one creative endeavor, you kind of leave it in what Roald Dahl described as a Mooney state. Where talking to people and engaging with the world feels kind of like you're trying to, engage with real people when you're still on the spectral plane. It's pretty weird, and Melville was clearly in it when he was writing Moby Dick. I think he was doing this almost every single day for 18 months, and it was amazing to hear that he had arranged that a person come to his door to give him food, whether he liked it or not. The person would just keep knocking and then, give him the food. So that's just crazy. And I bring that up just because, like I said, you notice that reading this book. You know that the person who's writing this is just in that state of just like creative, deity whispered goodness hypnosis where he's just going and going. And it's like watching Evel Knievel just like jump buses. Like, how far can he go? It's just amazing. So that's kind of my introduction into this book, is through the actual introduction. The next thing, I think I lost one of my slips of paper. That's so sad. But the next thing that I want to talk about with Moby Dick, because part of this video, beyond me just talking about how much I love it, is me trying to sell it, because I would think you should read it. And I think Moby Dick has bad PR. One of the bad things that Moby Dick has PR-wise is its length, which I think is unfortunate, because Moby Dick, yes, it's pretty long, but it's not that long. It's not as long as a lot of other books, like a lot of ancient books and ancient poems, and it's just so good. It's not that hard to read once you get used to the language, like I said. And to finish the thought that I earlier started on why it is, this goes back to earlier in the video when I said, why is it that you can read Moby Dick without notes? It's because of what I just read from in this letter. It's that because he was in this flow state, my theory at least, because he was in this flow state and just writing it and following the creative instinct, when you get swept along in that flow state with him, if you catch that wavelength and write it, it doesn't really matter whether you know every word or not. You still feel it. You feel the instinct. And that is just amazing, because there's going to be a lot of words you don't know, but context in this case will give you everything you need. And what I mean by context in this case is kind of the like creative emotional context that he was in. That is powerfully surging through this book, through pretty much every sentence. If there is a moment in this book where I was not feeling that, I would hedge my bets that it was probably because of me in my own headspace than it was from Melville. I think this book doesn't really put a foot wrong. But I'll come back to defend that, because there are some people who say it puts feet wrong when it gets to the whaling chapters and the ones that are a bit non-fictional. But I will defend those too, because they're awesome. And one of the reasons why I'll defend them will be my segue into the next point, which is that this book is so fun and funny. It's both fun and funny. And I lost the, as I just said, I lost the marker that I had to talk about this. But one of the passages that I really want to read to demonstrate just how fun and funny this book is the chapter, the ending of the chapter, A Bosom Friend. And for those of you who don't know, I don't want to spoil too much about the plot of this book, but I will talk about its structure. So if you're worried about plot spoilers, in that way, just if you're sensitive to it, then maybe don't watch the whole video, because I will talk about sort of the structure of the book, but I won't talk about like the way it ends. Maybe I'll talk about the, like I said, the structure. I mean, the whole book is based around a single encounter with a whale, which is Moby Dick. And naturally that comes at the end. That's the climax, and it's an amazing climax, but I won't tell you how it ends. Anywho, I would love to read you the ending of this chapter, A Bosom Friend. Essentially, Queequeg and Ishmael meet one another at the Spouter Inn. And Ishmael, who is a Presbyterian, God-fearing, God-loving, Christian white man, naturally is a little bit concerned about Queequeg, who is naturally concerned about Ishmael. And they end up becoming, as it says, bosom friends. And I just want to read the end of this chapter because it's wonderful. And the context of this is that Queequeg asks Ishmael, after a nice smoke together, to help him pay tribute to an idol he has. And Ishmael suffers from a small kind of moral conundrum at this. And this is what he says. I was a good Christian, born and bred in the bosom of the infallible Presbyterian Church, a little tongue-in-cheek. How then could I unite with this wild idolater in worshipping his piece of wood? But what is worship, thought I? Do you suppose now, Ishmael, that the magnanimous God of heaven and earth, pagans and all included, can possibly be jealous of an insignificant bit of black wood? Impossible! But what is worship? To do the will of God. That is worship. And what is the will of God? To do to my fellow man what I would have my fellow man do to me. That is the will of God. Now Queequeg is my fellow man, and what do I wish that this Queequeg would do to me? Why, unite with me in my particular Presbyterian form of worship. Consequently, I must then unite with him in his. Ergo, I must turn idolater. So I kindled the shavings, helped prop up the insolent little idol, offered him burnt biscuit with Queequeg, salamed before him twice or thrice, kissed his nose, and that done, we undressed and went to bed, at peace with our own consciences and all the world. But we did not go to sleep without some little chat. How it is, I know not, but there is no place like a bed for confidential disclosures between friends. Man and wife, they say, there open the very bottom of their souls to each other, and some old couples often lie and chat over old times till nearly morning. Thus, then, in our heart's honeymoon, lay I and Queequeg, a cozy, loving pair. Tell me you don't want to read this book right now. That is so delightful. There's a lot, of course, in that chapter and in that passage that I just selected. But the one thing that I really want to point out about it, beyond just the kind of obvious fun, maybe homoerotic things happening on the surface, is just how friendly and loving it is. There's one more thing that I'll read to y'all that has that at the end of this video. I'll read you one of my favorite chapters, or my favorite passages. But that is just so delightful and gets at the camaraderie that Herman Melville was always seeking in his life, that he may or may not have found. But anyways, I just wanted to read that mostly for the joy of reading it out loud. But man, Herman Melville really just knows how to capture the loving bond that we fellow men and women, of course, can share between one another. There's very few female characters in this book, unfortunately, but it is a whaling vessel in the 1850s. So, not that there weren't women on whaling vessels, but on the Pequod, there's not. So before I transition into kind of the end of this video, I'll just say that I'll get into the thing that I would like to defend about this book, which is the nautical chapters, the infamous whaling chapters. And one of the reasons why I just read the passage that I just read you is to give you a sense of how fun and delightful his prose is, and how friendly Herman Melville's voice is on the page. It's like that throughout. And even during the chapters that are describing cetology, which is the study of whaling. There's a whole chapter in this book, it's not that long, that is dedicated to just the classification of whales. And people famously throw shade on this book because it has a couple of chapters about, I don't know, like a tail, a monkey rope, which is something that's part of a whaling vessel, the color white, and they say that these are boring just because they're not part of the plot. And I think that's because we were sort of raised in, or at least I was, a pretty plot-heavy literary world when it came to like teen fiction, teen fantasy, dystopian fiction for teenagers. Plot was a really big deal. And quality of writing, though, that's what matters. And the quality of writing is so good throughout that Herman Melville could write about nails and I would read about it. He could write about planks of wood and it would be interesting because he's passionate about it. And that is really, for me, the most important thing. And by the way, the cetology chapter about just the classification of whales is hilarious and fun to read because it's all wrong. It's all like, he's describing like an orca whale 3 different times and he doesn't realize it's the same whale. And if you read the Wikipedia article that's like basically a companion piece to the cetology chapter, it makes for a delightful reading experience. I just highly recommend reading this all the way through. Of course, if you want to actually read Moby Dick in our a little afraid of getting through those chapters and don't want to get bogged down, skip them. Don't worry about it too much. I hope that you don't, but if it takes doing that in order to fall in love with it, do that first, and then go back and read them later, because once you fall under the spell of Herman Melville's prose, you will want to read everything that he wrote in this book. And if you're like me, you'll want to read everything that he ever wrote. Anyways, next, I don't know, there's not a real proper structure to this video, but hopefully you're getting a sense that I have thought through. I have, like, a list of things that I want to talk about here that I'm steadily following along on. But one of the things that I want to mention before I close out the video is the subject matter, which is whaling. Whaling is unspeakably cruel. That's just what it is. It is the murder of, like, really intelligent mammals that have culture and have children and experience grief and emotions comparable, you know, what do we know? How can we know what the experience of a whale is, but comparable to those of human beings? And the whaling industry, for that reason, is intrinsically evil. I mean, it's a good thing that it's gone. And Herman Melville acknowledges this. He obviously, in this book, writes about the glory of whaling because it's very dangerous, and he goes into those things, and they sweep you along, and they are fascinating, somewhat curios of an age gone by. But he does not shy away from how viscerally gory whaling is. It's pretty horrific. One of the things that I wanted to read, this is very, very short, this isn't even a whole passage, it's just a couple of sentences, happens during a chapter where they find a whale who is old and dying and has, I think, an old rusted harpoon barb stuck in him, who is blinded, and it's a really pitiable thing, and he gets at the pitiability. Anyways, they're coming upon this whale, and this is what he says in the book. As the boats now more closely surrounded him, the whole upper part of his form, with much of it that is ordinarily submerged, was plainly revealed. His eyes, or rather the places where his eyes had been, were beheld, as strange mist-grown masses gather in the knot-holes of the noblest oaks when prostrate, so from the points which the whale's eyes had once occupied now protruded, blind bulbs, horribly pitiable to see. But pity there was none. For all his old age and his one arm and his blind eyes, he must die the death and be murdered, in order to light the gay bridals and other merrymakings of men, and to illuminate the solemn churches that preach unconditional inoffensiveness by all to all. That's pretty profound, in my opinion. There's a lot there, of course, beyond the basic sadness and cruelty of this ancient creature that is just being hunted and killed mercilessly. There is the hypocrisy of man in there. He must die the death and be murdered in order to light the gay bridals and other merrymakings of men, to illuminate the solemn churches that preach unconditional inoffensiveness by all to all. And this speaks to one of the things that people can get out of Moby Dick, which is that it can kind of be read allegorically in almost any light, almost any lens through which you want to look through, you can find in this book. A lens that can be seen right here is maybe a critique of capitalism. Maybe you are thinking, you know, I'm living in this world, and just by buying things, just by going to the grocery store, I'm inevitably supporting systems. Maybe it's a form of slavery across oceans that you never see, or, you know, things akin to that. And writing about how oil lamps lit in churches that are preaching the word of God and mercifulness, that are being lit by whale oil that was, you know, acquired through violent cruelty, that's powerful writing. So I wanted to bring that up because I know whaling might turn people off from this book just because of that element of it. But I want to not necessarily assuage any fears you have about it, because it does go into the glory of whaling again. But let you know that Herman Melville doesn't turn a blind eye to it. He does give it the respect that it deserves and the solemnity that it deserves. Anywho, let's move on. That's kind of the darkest part of this video, probably. And the last piece of writing that I'd like to read to you from this book is something that you probably, if you have read into Moby Dick, or if you've read Moby Dick, you will certainly remember. And that is from chapter 94, titled A Squeeze of the Hand, in which Ishmael describes taking whale oil and squeezing out the clumps that have gathered together to kind of make it even. And he's doing this with other fellow fishermen. And he gets to this passage. I mean, this whole chapter is amazing, but I'll just read you this. Because if I had my druthers, I'd end up reading you this whole book. Anyways, this is how it goes. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. All the morning long I squeezed that sperm, till I myself almost melted into it. I squeezed that sperm till a strange sort of insanity came over me, and I found myself unwittingly squeezing my co-laborers' hands in it, mistaking their hands for the gentle globules. Such an abounding, affectionate, friendly, loving feeling did this advocation beget, that at last I was continually squeezing their hands and looking up into their eyes sentimentally, as much as to say, "Oh, my dear fellow beings, why should we longer cherish any social acerbities, or know the slightest ill humor or envy? Come, let us squeeze hands all round. Nay, let us squeeze ourselves into each other. Let us squeeze ourselves universally into the very milk and sperm of kindness." So that's wonderful. I mean, look, I'm 23 years old. I can make the jokes. It says the word sperm a couple of times. But beyond just the fun homoerotic subtext of that, the thing that I really love about that, and the thing that I love about Herman Melville's writing as a whole, and that's why I chose this passage to end it, the thing I love about it is the kindness of it, the true lovingness of it. Herman Melville is a loving writer. He loves the things that he's writing about, that he's there's a word for it. It's almost like, there's the word for it. It's almost like he writes odes in this book. He writes an ode to, like I said, the monkey rope, or to the whale of the tail, or to the color white. He picks a subject matter that doesn't normally get attention, dedicated attention, and he just goes at it for not even that long. Normally a chapter is like between 5 and 15 pages. And maybe you can already sense this of like myself, but like that's what I love of life in general, and what I love in books is loving them and talking about them, and in his case, writing about them in some of the most beautiful prose ever. That is just a wonderful way to spend, how long is this? 560 pages? Oh, 640 pages. That kind of writing is wonderful, even through all of those nonfiction chapters. So anyways, I'm sort of making an argument to read this book as if I even need to defend it. You've got to read Moby Dick. I mean, you just have to do it at some point. And if you have already read it, of course, I hope that you share my enthusiasm for it. And if so, comment in the comment section, or email me and we'll talk about it. Organize like a face chat and we can talk about it. Because I really do want to, share my love for this book, because as is, I don't really have anyone in my life who I've ever been able to talk to about this book deeply with, which is one of the reasons why I'm here on Booktube, which is amazing. So the very final thing that I'll talk about in this book is the structure. As I said earlier, it begins with this kind of buddy seafaring romance setup of Queequeg and Ishmael cuddling together. And I've refrained of talking about the plot up to this point. I don't think I've even said, by the way, up in this video until now, that this is the story of Captain Ahab's revenge on the white whale. I kind of just took that as like accepted. Maybe I should have, but that's like the plot, is that Captain Ahab is trying to seek revenge on a single whale, which Melville doesn't ever describe. What's the right word for it? He never describes this whale as having like spiritual, metaphysical qualities. It is very much just a whale that is white and also particularly brutal and savage. But to Ahab, it's not. To Ahab, it represents all of the evil in the world. Anywho, I've refrained talking about it because I feel like you can actually get a lot of joy out of the plot on the first read through, whereas the joy of these passages and of the things that I love about it, that kind of joy I think is inexhaustible. Whereas the plot joy, as much as I think plot is fun and cool, it's not. You don't reread books for the same plot. I mean, you reread it for its writing quality and for the the quality of its ideas and so on. But structure-wise, I just want to say, maybe I shouldn't talk about it too much, but the structure plot-wise is incredible. It has this setup, and you think it's going to become a seafaring romance, and then it becomes something else. It becomes these digressions on life and things, out of which Herman Melville can take basically any message that he's either choosing to find or that he finds for himself. It's kind of astonishing reading this. But the one structure thing that really brings the plot together, that really makes it work, that kind of binds it, is that I believe 8 times, 8 or 9, but I'm pretty sure 8 times in the book, the Pequod, the sailing vessel on which we are firmly ensconced in, meets other whaling vessels, just on the open oceans. It's not all that uncommon, and they provide for some of the more grounding chapters. Some of them are really fun and exciting, especially after so long. Oh no, I just lost... okay, cool. My computer, after 30 minutes, just started to dim, and I was like, oh no, is the recording ending? But anyways, these chapters really ground the book narratively. And as we approach the climax of the book, these whaling vessels that you see have had succeedingly more and more close encounters with Moby Dick, and each with maybe this is the right word, but with aggrandizing levels of destruction. It gets worse. The 8th ship, the first ship they meet, 8 out of the 8 doesn't even know about Moby Dick, and maybe the 6th out of the 8 does, and then the 5th out of the 8 says, oh, we heard some other ship saw it, and then the 3rd ship you see did see it and lost a sailor, and the second to last ship you see has had a really dire consequence. And then of course the last ship you meet is the Rachel, and that chapter I'll leave for you because it's remarkable. Anyways, that's my 30-minute long video on Moby Dick. I can't believe I just talked for 30 minutes about Moby Dick. If it were a conversation, it would go on for hours, I'm sure. But yes, this is my favorite book of all time right now. There have been 3 favorite books of mine in my life. It's no secret. I'm happy to say them. To Kill a Mockingbird is probably in 2nd, and the book Anna Karenina is 3rd. To Kill a Mockingbird is Harper Lee, and Anna Karenina is by Leo Tolstoy. And those have been the 3 books in my life that I've had the most... I don't even want to say impact on me, because it's not just the impact they leave on me. It's all of the above of the enjoyment of reading them, the way they changed my life, the way I esteem them as books, all of those things combined. And Moby Dick by Herman Melville is at the top, man. It's at the top. It's so good. Please read this book and tell me about it. If you have read it, talk to me about it. I would love to chat with you. The thing that, God, I can't even express how grateful I am for y'all, because I feel like with this Booktube channel, there's not a number that I'm going for. I feel like I've already reached like the pinnacle of success, because I feel like I'm already talking to y'all and I'm getting comments from y'all, and I would just love to continue that. So thank you for watching this really long video, and I hope that y'all are having a wonderful holiday season and doing some reading. Hopefully you have some time away from work to read. If you do, maybe Moby Dick can be a book that you take off your shelf if it's been on your shelf for a long time and read. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.